Hi everyone, my name is Eric Birkle and I'm the curator here at Cheekwood Estate and Gardens. I'm standing right now in our long hallway, which is the entry to the Spanning the Atlantic, the Arts and Crafts Movement in America exhibition. And this exhibition takes a look at, exactly as the title indicates, the Arts and Crafts Movement, which took place in the United States from circa 1895 to about 1915. This exhibition follows a similarly titled exhibition that we had last year that looked at the British iteration of arts and crafts, which sort of kicked off the movement before it came across the Atlantic and sort of rooted and took place in the US. Behind me in the long hallway here, you'll see examples of some of the really early work from this movement, which was inspired heavily by the Gothic era in the 12th and 13th century, some of the artistry from that time, both in metal forging as well as woodwork. And you'll also see that this movement takes inspiration from the American colonial period several centuries later. So this is kind of the beginning of that story and the beginning of the sources of inspiration that arts and crafts artists derived their work from. One of the major drivers of and advocates for the arts and crafts movement in the US was an artist by the name of Gustav Stickley. Really an artisan and furniture maker, a cabinet maker as he would have been referred to in his day. He designed and fabricated many more objects than just cabinets, including library tables and lamps such as the ones next to me here. Gustav Stickley's work we'll see in additional galleries throughout the exhibition. He was a really prevalent contributor to the movement. He founded the Craftsman magazine, which published writings and images and advocated for the philosophy of arts and crafts, which held that the industry of the 19th century was really sort of polluting people's lives and distancing them from the makers of their furniture and the works that they sort of surrounded themselves with in their day-to-day lives, be that a functional tea or cider set, or even the couch or sofa that they're sitting on. The gallery that we're now in is titled Inspired by Nature. So the teachings of sort of philosophers and art critics and writers such as John Ruskin and William Morris from England are really inspirational in the philosophy of the arts and crafts movement. One aspect of that philosophy is this bringing nature sort of indoors, and it sort of coincides with the Art Nouveau movement, which many people are a bit more familiar with. You might have seen the sort of whiplash curve of Art Nouveau design and a lot of organic screens and even paintings of female figures, and that carries over into furniture as well. In the arts and crafts vein, we see works that were fabricated in various media, such as the bronze, silver, and earthenware behind me, from various manufacturers who were looking at this philosophy and creating with all of that in mind. In this room, you'll find works in various media that mimic or evoke forms from the natural world, be they plants sort of springing forth from the edge of a pond or other source of water, or the bulbous form of a flower bulb that would be planted in the ground before germinating, as is the case with the candlesticks, the pitcher, and the vase by Tico behind me. The Tico vase in particular is one of my favorite in the exhibition for this blue-green glaze that you sort of see here, which is absolutely beautiful and a trademark of Tico pottery that you'll see more of throughout this exhibition in other contexts. I'm now standing in what we title the Craftsman Interior, which is essentially an evocation of what we might think of as a period room of an interior of a home from the arts and crafts period. So again, circa 1895 to 1915. So while there were many various stylistic ideations going on in the early 20th century. At that point in time, really that first decade of the 20th century, arts and crafts saw its height of popularity. And so you can imagine that a middle-class individual or upper middle-class individual or family who had the means at the time would have furnished their house something like this. Now, of course, this is a bit imaginary in the sense that I'm standing in a singular room that gives this evocation of maybe a sort of seating area, as you see behind me here, such as a living room or family room, as well as a dining space with this wonderful octagonal table designed by Gustav Stickley in the center here. And then off to the side, we have some chafing dishes on a sideboard, also designed by Gustav Stickley, which approximates a sort of serving area, perhaps even a kitchen or something that would have been on the walls of a dining room. In the center of the room, we have a painting titled The Chase by Charles Livingston Bull, which captures the sort of two-dimensional tendencies of the arts and crafts style. The arts and crafts style is not necessarily known for painting as much as certain other styles. We see a lot of ceramics, we see a lot of three-dimensional creativity in the form of furniture and silver making, woodwork. But this is a great example of the sort of block-like nature wherein arts and crafts artists found inspiration in East Asian block printing and carried that over into Western painting traditions. This period room, as I mentioned, does evoke the interior of a house from the time, which would have been called a craftsman home or arts and crafts style house. And this was advocated for, and these designs presented primarily in a magazine published by Gustav Stickley titled The Craftsman, which is where the title for these sorts of homes derives from. These style of homes are often referred to as bungalows as well, kind of in everyday language. And they were constructed beyond that end date of 1915 into the 1920s, 30s, even 40s in towns across the US as this movement kind of expanded across the continent and trickled into small towns and various communities. Even here in Nashville, you'll find arts and crafts style homes along avenues such as Blair Boulevard or Belmont Boulevard, south of downtown. The gallery I'm now standing in is one of two entitled Leading the Charge. And these galleries look at some of the key players in the arts and crafts movement that produced work from furniture to art pottery. Art pottery was one of the major components of this movement, and there was a rise in production of work of this nature, and really a definition of work of this nature that occurred at this time. One such work is this lamp that's behind me, which is a collaboration between Grueby Faience Company and Tiffany Studios. This collaboration is really quite a rare and wonderful combination that results in this turtleback tile lamp that you see on this pedestal. The majority of the works in this exhibition are on loan to us from the Crabtree Farm, which is located up to the north of Chicago in Illinois along Lake Michigan. Well, the Grueby Tiffany lamp almost evokes this alien bug-like creature with the form that it takes on and represents Gruby's signature cucumber green. To my left here, we see a similar but also different take on arts and crafts pottery, and this is by Tico, another producer, a major player in the arts and crafts movement. And so we see this really beautiful blue-green vase, glaze rather, on this Roman salad bowl, and on these vases that appear almost as if they were removed from all cultures, or as if all cultures from around the world were kind of put into a blender and mixed together. Following the Leading the Charge galleries, which take a look at the height of the arts and crafts movement, including many important women artists such as Adelaide Robineau and others who worked for Newcomb College Pottery, the last gallery of the exhibition that I'm standing in here now is entitled Designing for a New Era, Anticipating Post-War Society. And this refers to World War I and the kind of change in tastes aesthetically that were beginning to evolve in the second decade of the 20th century, but were really exacerbated or pushed forward in time by World War I. Running into the late 19-teens, Gustav Stickley, who was publishing the Craftsman magazine, began to lose a bit of his following. And in order to adapt his company, he changed his style quite radically, which in some ways, unfortunately, resulted in him falling even further out of favor. However, his chrome-walled line of furniture is featured in this gallery, which is really quite striking and something that's beginning to garner much more attention by collectors of Stickley and museums who are looking back at this time and really realizing the importance that this somewhat renewed conservatism had as it returns kind of back to this point of colonial inspiration, which is where the arts and crafts story began. Furthermore, companies like Marblehead Pottery were adapting to changing tastes as well. And what came to be the Art Deco movement was born in France in the 19-teens as well. And so that starts to make its way, just as the arts and crafts movement did, across the Atlantic and over to America and influence tastes here. And of course, that movement was very much about geometricization, and we start to see the additional simplification of the form and had a very, very specific codified style that the arts and crafts movement didn't necessarily have, because it was more about this philosophy of living with handmade objects. So in the pedestals on either side of me here, you'll see vessels that begin to reflect this slightly pared down appearance. This whole modern movement begins to charge forward rapidly. And that's the interesting thing about arts and crafts, is that even though it rejected this industrialization and this new modernism, it was actually inherently a part of it. Although taste changed enough that at a certain point, it as well was left behind. But that's not to end things on a negative note. Some of the work as this movement transitioned into other aesthetic directions are really quite striking, and we felt it important to feature those from both Crabtree Farm and Cheekwood's collection as you wrap up this exhibition.